Welcome, friends. This info session will discuss the grants for creative individuals. We deeply appreciate your taking the time to learn about our grant program and join us today. We'll give it a minute to allow attendees to join. Again, welcome to this info session to discuss the Grants for Creative Individuals program from Mass Cultural Council. While the rest of the attendees join, I'll mention that the image you see on this slide, which depicts the shadows of two figures boxing, is a still image from a film by Naomi Yang, who recently received a Mass Cultural Council grant. All of the art that you see during this presentation either features or was created by an artist who received a direct grant from Mass Cultural Council. First, I want to acknowledge and thank Melissa Burdick, who is providing live captions through CART for today's presentation. Within Zoom, you can turn on captions by clicking the live transcript button in your Zoom toolbar, or you can open up transcription in a separate window by clicking the stream text URL, and we will put that URL in the chat in just a moment. It looks like we already have. We also are lucky and greatly appreciate the participation of two American Sign Language interpreters, Danielle Theriault and Doris Johns from Partners Interpreting. Again, we have great gratitude for those who are here, Melissa, Danielle, and Doris supporting the access features of this presentation. Welcome. My name is Dan Blask. My pronouns are he, him. I am a slender, middle-aged Caucasian man with a bald head, glasses, and a dark mustache and beard. I am lucky enough to work for Mass Cultural Council and manage artist programs. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to join us today to learn about the Grants for Creative Individuals program. I'm joined today by colleagues from Mass Cultural Council, Kelly Bennett and Summer Conforto. Together, we make up the artists team at Mass Cultural Council. You will hear from Summer shortly, and you will likely hear Kelly's voice during the presentation, repeating questions aloud from the Q&A. We are also joined today by our colleagues Charles Baldwin and Christian Kelly, who are supporting behind the scenes, and my gratitude to my colleagues at Mass Cultural Council. So what is Mass Cultural Council? Mass Cultural Council is your state agency supporting the creative and cultural sector. If you are a Massachusetts artist, it is literally our job and our privilege at Mass Cultural Council to support you in your work. Today, we are talking about the Grants for Creative Individuals program, and whether it's this grant or a future grant and service, we look forward to having the opportunity to support you and your work. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please put them in the Q&A feature. Some we may answer directly in the Q&A, and some we may answer live during the presentation. And we'll do our best to answer all questions, but if we do not get to your question, either due to time constraints or because it is unique to your situation, please reach out to us at creative.individuals@mass.gov. We'll also list that email later on in the presentation. And I want to mention, if you can't stay for the entire presentation, it is being recorded and will be published very shortly on our YouTube channel. There is already a Spanish language version available on our YouTube channel. And now I am pleased to welcome my colleague Summer Conforto to speak.
Thanks so much, Dan. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Summer Conforto. My pronouns are she, her. I am the program officer for traditional arts here at Mass Cultural Council. As Dan mentioned, I am a part of the artists team and very happy to be here today. So we're going to talk about today's agenda. In this presentation, you can learn general information about this grant. You'll learn who can apply, how to apply, and learn about the program timeline and have a chance to ask questions, as Dan mentioned at the end. As a reminder, please do still take the time to read through the program guidelines and eligibility on our website thoroughly. So the grants for creative individuals, it's our primary grant for artists, culture bearers, and creative practitioners. This program accepts applications from creative individuals in all artistic disciplines. In the past, some of our programs have been divided by discipline, and you may have had to wait until your specific discipline was up for review. But with grants for creative individuals, practitioners in all artistic and creative fields can apply every year. And this slide features a recent Mass Cultural Council grantee, Steph Davis, playing the marimba. It was taken by Lauren Miller. To equitably advance creativity throughout the Commonwealth with unrestricted grants to individuals who demonstrate achievement of creative expression and commitment to their artistic cultural practice, that is the program's mission. In terms of eligibility, who's eligible? Artists, culture bearers, also sometimes known as traditional artists, and creative practitioners in all creative fields or cultural traditions. So that's visual artists, literary artists, theater artists, performers, film, media artists, music artists, designers, drag artists, DJs, cross-disciplinary artists, and more. And this slide features a detail of sculpture depicting a melting popsicle with 3 wasps. And this was created by Judith Klossner. So more eligibility. To apply, you need to be 18 years or older, a full-time resident of Massachusetts as defined by the Massachusetts Department of Revenue, not a recent individual grant recipient, so you cannot have received a direct grant from Mass Cultural Council over $2,000 in the past 3 years. But please note that this does not include local cultural council grants. So if you received one of those local cultural council grants, you are still eligible for this program. You cannot be a full-time student, and you cannot be a Mass Cultural Council staff member or family of a staff member, and not a member of Mass Cultural Council's governing council. And if it turns out you are not eligible to apply for this grant this year, please consider filling out the panelist registration form in our grants management system if you would be interested in being considered as one of this program's reviewers. And before we move on, we wanted to ask if anybody has any questions about eligibility or anything we've covered so far.
Hi, this is Dan. Yes, I wonder, Kelly, are there any questions about anything we've covered thus far from the Q&A?
2 questions. One is, can artists who work collaboratively apply together or individually? And if someone is serving on an LCC, can they apply?
Great. Thank you for those questions. So artists who are collaborating would not apply together. Assuming both artists are eligible, each can apply to this grant, but each should make clear what their part in the submitted work samples is. Specifically what, it's fine if it's part of a collaboration, but what is their part in that collaboration? And again, they can both apply individually. The second question was whether LCC volunteers are eligible to apply. So first of all, thank you so much for contributing to your local cultural council and arts in your communities. We appreciate that, and absolutely, you are eligible to apply for this program.
And this is Kelly. Another question. Does receiving the COVID relief grant prevent eligibility?
Hi, this is Dan. Thank you for that question. So presumably, it depends which COVID relief grant you mean. There were grants in 2020 and 2021 that were $1,000 and $1,500 respectively. And if you received one of those, you would be eligible to apply. However, if you received one of the $5,000 cultural sector recovery grants in 2023, you would not be eligible to apply. We are instituting a 3-year wait out period after receiving a grant over $2,000. So someone who received either a Grants for Creative Individuals grant last year or the recovery grant the year prior would not yet be eligible to apply for this program. But if that is the case, that you are not eligible to apply and you might be interested in reviewing for this program, please do fill out the panelist or reviewer registration form. It is a paid position, and it's something we would deeply appreciate.
And this is Kelly. Another question, how many people get this grant in a year?
Hi, this is Dan. So we are anticipating awarding 435 grants this year, let's say somewhere between 425 and 450. Occasionally there can be funds that become available during the grant year, but we can't promise that. So I would say about 435 grants, which we are guessing will be about 10% of the applicant pool.
This is Kelly, Dan. Are members of local cultural councils eligible to apply?
Hi, this is Dan. Yes, absolutely. We appreciate LCC members' service, and they are eligible to apply for this grant.
Thank you. So the grants are $5,000. They are unrestricted. You don't need to propose a project or fill out a budget in the application. You don't need to submit a final report later telling us how you use the grant. And this slide includes a vibrantly colored abstract painting by Carmima Deborah McMillan. How to apply, what's in the grant application. So we'll ask for, in the application, we'll ask for a brief personal information, such as your contact info and the general category of your work, a brief artist narrative, work samples, and there will be several questions relating to the program's funding priorities. This slide includes a photo depicting Oscar Noel Carrasco playing a Puerto Rican bomba drum. For the artist narrative, we would advise to keep it brief. There's only 1,500 characters, and that includes punctuation and spaces. Alternately, you can submit an audio or video version of your narrative, which should be 2 minutes or less in length. And this slide features a brightly hued painting of a beachside shack in Colombia by Felipe Ortiz. Some things to consider when you're writing your artist narrative: consider how your work shows your achievement of creative expression. and commitment to your artistic or cultural practices. What do we need to know about your work to understand your creative expression and commitment? This slide features a collage incorporating a young African-American man's face by artist Jamal Thorne.
This is Dan again. So we ask you to submit a sample or samples of your creative work as part of the application. This sample can be a document file or document files, an image file or image files, an audio file or audio files, a video file or video files, or it can be a combination of these. But the thing to note is that the total number of minutes, pages, or image files should not add up to more than 5. For instance, let's say you submit a 2-page document and a 3-minute video, that would be fine. Or 3 images plus a 2-minute audio file, that would add up to 5. So that would meet our requirement. The important thing to remember is that the maximum is 5. And this slide features an altered photograph of 2 people conversing by Corey Jazio. How will the grants be decided? Grantees will be selected through a review process that includes geographic distribution, funding priorities, and input or scores by reviewers from the Massachusetts creative and cultural community. As I mentioned earlier, we anticipate awarding approximately 435 grants of $5,000. This slide features art with columns of color beneath a kaleidoscopic pattern, and it's by Wiley Holton. What do we mean by geographic distribution, and how do we distribute by geography? So grants will be awarded by county in proportion to that county's application demand. For example, let's say that 8% of the program's applications came from applicants in Essex County. Then Mass Cultural Council would award approximately 8% of the program's grants to applicants from Essex County. So it's important to make sure your address is up to date in our system. And you can do that after you log in under My Profile. This slide features a vividly colored painting of a caribou by Andromeda Lyle.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. I have a couple of questions for you.
Great.
One is, could you talk about what does achievement of creative expression mean operationally?
Hi, this is Dan. I'm not sure what you mean by operationally, but when we say achievement of creative expression, that means what we mean by it is that what you are setting out to do with your work, what you are setting out to explore with your work, what questions you are asking with your work, your goals with your work, we can see them in the work samples that you submit. So you'll have the chance in that artist narrative to discuss the goals, the questions, the themes you're exploring in your work, the things you're trying to do in an artist narrative. And then with the work samples, the reviewers will have the chance to see samples of that same creative expression that you have described in the artist narrative depicted in those work samples themselves.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. I've noticed a number of questions regarding different types of discipline. For instance, if an author is eligible or if a documentary filmmaker is eligible. Could you expand on the disciplines eligible for this program?
Hi, this is Dan. Yes, so we're essentially accepting applications from artists and creatives in any creative discipline. So visual arts, literary arts, and media arts, just to name some of the ones you asked about, Kelly. So a writer or literary artist would fit under literature. A media artist would include documentary filmmakers. Essentially, any artist doing creative work can find a place to apply in this program. It doesn't so much matter which category artists choose. It's not like past programs where the grant was divided by category. So let's say I was a poet, I would wait until the year poetry came up and I'd apply then. And then the next year I'd have to wait out a year because poetry was not reviewed. This year, poets, literary artists of all kinds, all apply along with dancers, music artists, hard to define artists, multidisciplinary artists. If you have any question about what category you might want to choose, you are free to contact us, but please note that we ask for that information not so much as a way of keeping folks in or out, but of knowing which reviewers would be best suited to look at that work. And then also we ask for a general category of your work, because at the end of this process, after the reviewers have given scores and after we have tabulated the funding priorities and the geographic distribution, if there are tied scores, say at the last grant slot, that tie would be broken by going to make sure that there's also distribution among those those discipline categories. So that what we hope will happen is that the same number of, say, music artists who apply, roughly the same number receive grants.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. In terms of geographic distribution, the question is, does it mean that the odds are the same no matter where one is applying from?
Hi, this is Dan. That's a good question. Are the odds the same no matter where they are applying? It's hard to say yes or no definitively, because so much of that depends on the other applicants from that same county. But there's not an advantage or disadvantage per se to living, say, in a big city or living in a rural county. Essentially, there will be a parallel number of grants to the number of applications from each county. So I would hesitate again to say that there is an advantage because that again depends on the specific applicants in that county. But I would hope that applicants would feel that there wouldn't be a disadvantage to living where they live.
Hi, Summer, this is Kelly. Could you expand on what we mean by culture bearers?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much. This is Summer. So when we're talking about traditional artists or culture bearers, we're meaning people who pass on traditions, beliefs, art forms. They're often deeply rooted in their heritage and are responsible for passing down these traditions and practices and art forms with others in their community, particularly younger generations.
And just to note, if I hadn't been going so slowly, Summer would already be describing that because it's in the next slide. But Summer will discuss what we mean by culture bearer and how to verify your work as a culture bearer very soon. Okay, so let's continue. I mentioned in the last slide that the selection process includes geographic distribution, funding priorities, and input from reviewers in the cultural and creative community. So what do we mean by funding priorities, and what are the program's funding priorities? So what we mean by funding priorities is if you meet any of these priorities, you'll receive a modest ratings advantage in the review process. Funding priorities are distinct from eligibility. If you're eligible to apply, we'd encourage you to do so, whether you meet some or any of the funding priorities. Please note, funding priorities are just one part of the review process, and they're not meant to dissuade anyone from applying. As far as what the funding priorities are for this program, applicants will be modestly prioritized if they are new grantees, and we define that as meaning the applicant has not received a direct grant from Mass Cultural Council for the past 6 years. Similar to the eligibility on past grants, LCC grants do not count for this calculation. Applicants will be modestly prioritized if they are historically underfunded, and part of our definition of historically underfunded are as follows. Applicants who identify as BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, Latine, Latinx, Asian, Native American, Pacific Islander, and all other ethnicities of color. Secondly, we include in historically underfunded applicants who identify as having a disability. Third, we include in historically underfunded applicants whose creative practice has been limited by poverty. To receive this funding priority, you will need to provide proof of participation in one of the anti-poverty programs listed on our website. Those include SNAP, Medicaid or Mass Health, and others. And fourth, we include in historically underfunded applicants who are veterans of the United States Armed Forces. This is a new funding priority this year. The final funding priority for this program includes artists who meet our definition of culture bearer or traditional artist, which my colleague Summer will discuss in a minute. And this slide features a photograph of a handmade crochet animal mask by Huckleberry Elling.
This is Summer again. Thank you again for your question about what is a culture bearer. So how do we define culture bearer or traditional artist? For this program, specifically, the definition of culture bearer or traditional artist includes individuals whose creative or artistic practice sustains a living tradition within a specific community and is reflective of that community's aesthetics, practices, values, and or beliefs. So their community may be defined by ethnic, geographic, tribal, spiritual, or trade craft-based heritage. Most commonly, but not always, traditional arts are learned orally or by observation, passed down from generation to generation, rather than in an institutional or academic setting. So as one example, if you look at the image on this slide of work by Nadeja Bowling, you can see a form of twine basketry that has its basis and significance in the artist's Aquinnah Wampanoag heritage. Culture bearers or traditional artists may have previously applied for our traditional arts apprenticeships or the artist fellowships in traditional arts.
This is Dan speaking. I just want to interject that Summer wrote a great article about with tips on applying as a culture bearer or traditional artist for this grant, and it's on our online resource, ArtSake, which we'll talk a little bit more about later.
Thanks, Dan. So using our grants management system to apply, your email address will be your username. Once you're logged in as an individual, you'll find the application under current opportunities. And our best advice to you is to start as early as you can. Later in the application process, especially on deadline day, there are many people trying to apply at once, and our online system sometimes experiences delays. So it's better to start your application early and submit early, since we can't accept late applications. And this slide includes a drawing incorporating animals, plants, and other natural forms by Beyond Moore.
Hi, this is Kelly. I have a question regarding disability. Is an artist's disability a criterion for granting? Is a diagnosis of, is a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment a disability?
Hi, this is Dan. In answer to the first question, there are funding priorities and there is eligibility. And applicants who identify as having a disability will receive a modest funding priority, a modest ratings advantage in the program. But not meeting that funding priority does not mean you're not eligible. So we encourage applications from all eligible artists in Massachusetts, and don't recommend that artists sort of self-censor from applying if they don't meet all the funding priorities. As far as your specific question, we generally follow the ADA's definition of disability and would encourage you to research that and make your own decision about how you identify in that case. It's not for us to sort of police that decision. We are asking applicants how they identify for most of the funding priority questions, including disability. Kelly, were there any other questions before we continue?
Yes. Hi, Dan. This is Kelly. Is this grant a reimbursement grant?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. No, this grant is not a reimbursement grant. It's direct. It's a $5,000 grant, and it can be used in any way the recipients choose. That's a good segue into this slide. I wanted to share a few facts about this grant. As I mentioned, it's a direct $5,000 grant. It is taxable income. So if you receive the grant, you'll need to report it on your 2025 tax filings. There is contract paperwork involved. Most of that paperwork can be done online through a DocuSign process. However, there is at least one document that needs to be printed, notarized by a public notary and mailed to us. So just please note that there is that aspect of the process. We at Mass Cultural Council are a state agency, and state funds, including grants, are subject to be intercepted for past due state debts as part of the state's intercept program. So please note this is a program outside of Mass Cultural Council's control. And this slide depicts multimedia artist Mariona Loretta and is by Anneli Camargo, pardon me. The timeline for this program, the deadline is October 24th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. We anticipate announcing the results of the grants to all applicants, including those who receive grants and those who don't, in March 2025. We also anticipate the funds arriving sometime in April or May 2025. And as Summer mentioned earlier, no final report is necessary for this program. I wanted to briefly mention a few other opportunities for individuals from Mass Cultural Council. Most local cultural councils accept applications from individual artists. So along with the state grants from Mass Cultural Council, we also give funds to local councils in every community in every city and town in Massachusetts. And those local cultural councils then give grants to support local cultural projects in their communities. The deadline to apply for a local cultural council grant is October 16th, and it's completely fine to apply both to the grants for creative individuals and to a local cultural council. I mentioned earlier that Summer had written an article for ArtSake. ArtSake is our online resource to support Massachusetts artists. It includes a weekly roundup of opportunities for artists, and it also includes articles with resources such as tips for applying to the grants for creative individuals, and as I mentioned, tips for applying as a culture bearer traditional artist. If you were searching for employment in the arts, you can visit our website, higherculture.org, which is a database of cultural employment opportunities. And we'd strongly encourage you, if you have not already, to sign up to receive our e-newsletter, Artist News, which will include all dates and deadlines and news from Mass Cultural Council for artists. It's monthly. We mail it monthly, email it monthly, and you can find it and sign up for it at massculturalcouncil.org. This slide includes a drawing of Emily Dickinson by Will Dowd. It originally appeared in the Boston Globe. Again, please add your questions to the Q&A feature. We'll do our best to answer, but if there are questions we don't get to, email us at creative.individuals@mass.gov. This slide includes detail of a painting by Priya Green.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Could you walk through the selection process and how it's done?
Thank you. This is Dan. That's a great question. So the selection process for this program is that we will do an analysis of the applications and find out how many, what percentage of applications came from each county, and then figure out how many grants each county would be eligible to receive. All applications would go through this geographic distribution process. Applications will also receive funding priorities, and some of those are calculated based on what's already in our system, such as whether you received a grant within the last 6 years. That's already in our system, but then there are other funding priorities that include questions in the application form, and staff will review those funding priorities and see, just to check them, to verify them. And those will, of course, change the ratings of the applications. So then from there, we'll have a number of grants for each county and a ranked list in each county. And if there are tied scores at the final grant slot, we'll do some more analysis about the distribution of grants by discipline category and also distribution of grants by career stage, because we do include a question in the application about how many years artists have been at work in their practice. And that's how we come up with a final list of grantees, which we will announce, as I mentioned, we anticipate announcing in March.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. For a point of clarification, what people wonder if they received a grant from another organization, or if they've received a local cultural council grant, does that make them ineligible to apply?
Right. Hi, this is Dan. Yeah, so no, other grants from other organizations don't impact your eligibility. They don't impact that funding priority for new grantees for Mass Cultural Council, and local cultural council grants also don't factor into either of those calculations. In a way, it's only a small number of grants that really do fit into direct grants from Mass Cultural Council. That would include grants for creative individuals, this program, which started last year. It would include the cultural sector recovery grants for individuals in 2023. It would include artist fellowships that were given within the last 6 years and were over $2,000. And it would include traditional arts apprenticeship grants within the last 6 years. There are 2 other COVID-19 relief smaller grants that might impact the funding priority question, but would not impact eligibility. Those ones from further back in 2020 and 2021. And you would not, just to clarify, our system won't allow you to apply if it can tell that you had received one of those grants that would make you ineligible. So it's not something that you necessarily need to do the math for yourself. Our system will do the math for you.
Hi, this is Kelly with a question. Do we prefer more experienced artists or less experienced?
This is Dan. That's a great question. And the fact the program is meant to support creative expression broadly and equitably. And so there is no preference as far as the program is concerned. We want to support creative individuals essentially at every step.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. There's a question on disabled artists and living on Social Security, or how it would affect SSDI. Could you talk a bit about benefits and the funding and what's available to applicants?
Sure, that is a great question. Thank you for that, because this is Dan speaking again. I meant to mention this during the grant fact slide. So there is it's possible that a direct grant from us could impact eligibility for some public benefits. For what it's worth, from what I've been told, it doesn't tend to have an impact on disability benefits, the SSDI, but it could have an impact on, say, SSI, supplemental security income, which is strictly asset and income limited. So yes, the grant could have an impact on eligibility to those public benefits. You may want to look into your particular benefit program and see what that impact might be. But I would mention to you that if you receive public benefits and are awarded through this program, you receive a grant through this program, we offer benefits counseling to our grant recipients. So in other words, there are counselors from an organization called Work Without Limits that are available to discuss any impacts on public benefits, and hopefully, if there are impacts, help come up with a plan for mitigating or minimizing those impacts. So thank you, great question. I saw a note that there were frequent questions about similar grants from either other states or other organizations, and whether those count toward the eligibility or the funding priority. And again, they don't. Only direct grants from Mass Cultural Council could impact your eligibility or the funding priority, and that does not include local cultural council grants, such as, say, a grant from the Mendon Cultural Council or from the Somerville Arts Council. or what have you. If you apply to those local cultural councils, terrific, and we we wish you the best of luck. Those grants will not impact your application to the grants for creative individuals.
Hi, this is Kelly. I have questions around work samples, and people are wondering, can they send in multiple projects? What kind of work are we looking for? Can you expand a little bit about the work samples?
Great. Hi, this is Dan again. Yes, so a few things. Yes, you certainly may send in samples from multiple projects. Again, there's a limit to how much you can send, the limit of 5 minutes, pages, and or image files. But that can be for multiple projects. As far as what we are looking for, we're looking for the work that best makes the case that you've made in your artist narrative about your achievement of creative expression and your commitment to your artistic or cultural practice. So the case you've made in the artist narrative, you'd want to see that demonstrated in the work samples that you're submitting. And I would say a sort of parallel question is, what is your work that really best exemplifies who you are as an artist and what you do as an artist? And I know, Summer, please feel free to jump in if you had any further thoughts on this or any of the questions that come up.
I do really quickly also just want to add, I know there's a lot of questions. If for whatever reason we don't get to your specific question, as Dan mentioned, you can reach us at creative.individuals@mass.gov. But also we have staff office hours every Thursday in October until the deadline at 11 a.m. And I will find the registration for that and drop that into the chat. And in case you have any specific questions, feel free to bring those questions to our office hours during this, our Zoom online office hours.
Thank you, Summer. That's great.
Hi, this is Kelly. Can you talk a bit about the online application questions, whether or not you can edit it when you submit and so forth?
Sure. This is Dan speaking. We've tried our best to make the application as streamlined as possible. If there is an issue and you submit before you mean to, in that case, you would need to contact staff to change the application from submitted back to draft. Until you've submitted, though, you can save the application as a draft, make any changes you like up until you submit or deadline day on October 24th. So up until the 24th, if you either have saved your application as a draft, you can continue to make changes. If you've submitted your application and need to make a change and it's before October 24th, reach out to staff and we can help you.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. Could you remind us of how many applications will be awarded this year and how competitive the program is?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. Yes, it's a we've made strides in the number of grants that we're giving to individual artists, but it's still a competitive program in that we anticipate awarding approximately 10% of the applicants. We are planning to award 435 grants. There's some chance that number could increase slightly if there happen to be other funds from other programs that become available, but our current plan is to make 435 awards of $5,000. And our best guess is that that will be about 10% of the applicant pool. Summer or Kelly, are there points that we have not yet discussed that it's important to go over before we conclude. I do want to share that this I do want to share that this info session will be published on our YouTube page, and will be available to watch anytime. And as Summer mentioned, we are doing virtual office hours on Thursdays at 11 from now until the deadline. But beyond that, you can reach us by phone, by email. We will do our best to support you in any way that we can.
Hi, Dan, this is Kelly. A couple more questions.
Great.
Does the funding MCC get vary significantly year to year for the number of grants? And then, Summer, could you talk about what is a traditional arts apprenticeship?
Great. Those are great questions. This is Dan again. So does the funding that Mass Cultural Council receives vary greatly from year to year? So we have been fortunate that there has been a steady increase to our budget over the last several years. And we are deeply grateful to our partners in the legislature for that, and in the governor's office. But I would say that those increases tend to be incremental. We're also fortunate that Mass Cultural's Executive Director, Michael J. Bobbitt, is very enthusiastic about supporting artists and creative individuals. So the amount of Mass Cultural's funding that goes toward individuals, I would say, has been on a steady increase. Now, the one caveat to that is that in 2023, Mass Cultural received a really unprecedented amount of COVID recovery funds. So that year created a rather large spike in funds received by Mass Cultural Council that went out to the creative and cultural community. But if you looked at our funding kind of absent of that influx from the pandemic recovery funds, I'm happy to say you see a steady increase, both in terms of funds to Mass Cultural and to funds from Mass Cultural going to individuals. Oh, and Summer, there was a question about how a traditional arts apprenticeship might apply in this program.
Yeah, I think the question was, what is an apprenticeship? And that is a teaching and learning relationship between two artists, a mentor artist and an apprentice artist, somebody who's looking to have more instruction, further their artistic creative practice, and learn from somebody who has those skills and that knowledge and who has been practicing that art form for a very long time. So as a part of the culture bearer traditional artist funding priority, if you are engaged in a apprenticeship with either a mentor artist or an apprenticed artist, there is a place in the in that funding priority response to talk about your apprenticeship and the types of things that you hope to learn, or the types of things that you hope to teach in that priority. And because apprenticeships are really so integral to the passing on of knowledge and the process of cultural preservation, they're people who respond to the traditional art and funding, traditional artist culture bearer funding priority as a part of an apprenticeship team. they will receive a modestly higher priority than those who are just writing about their individual traditional arts practice. And Dan, please feel free to chime in if I'm missing anything.
Hi, Summer. This is Dan. No, I think that's a great explanation. It's distinct from the sort of learning that one might do at an academic institution. So if it's the sort of art process that you might learn in an MFA program, it's likely not a traditional arts apprenticeship, which is generally a more intensive and usually one-on-one, though there can be community-based apprenticeships as well. But no, I think your explanation was great, and I'm wondering, Kelly, if you have other questions that have appeared in the Q&A.
Yes. Hi, this is Kelly. Again, on the work samples, there's questions around what we're looking for and how to choose work samples. So for instance, if someone is a musician or a performing artist, is it better to have one long piece or, you know, a few shorter pieces? Is it better to have a combination of video and still images or all video, that type of thing?
Mm-hmm. Hi, this is Dan. You know, that it truly depends on your work and how your work is best understood and best encapsulated. So I would say allow your answers in the artist narrative, your artist narrative section, and the case that you're making in the artist narrative inform the samples that you are choosing. You know, if they all look good to you, sometimes it is nice to have more than one flavor of work. So let's say 2 songs rather than 1, but every situation is different, and there may just be that one video that best exemplifies the things you're talking about in the artist narrative. So perhaps that is the best choice for your particular situation. Kelly, do you have anything to add to that, or is there anything more that you can glean from the question that I can do to be helpful?
I would just add, really, to don't overthink it and understand that the quality of your recording, one can use a phone to record. You don't have to have very expensive equipment to create your audio files or video files or you know, JPEG images. The main thing is make sure that whatever work sample you do send in is clear, it's not blurry, or that the sound is unclear, that type of thing. You want to make sure the files read properly, sound properly, so that the reviewers can understand what they're looking at or listening to.
And I would just add to that, you know, think about what you are referencing in your artist narrative. So let's say you work in multiple forms and you reference paintings in your artist narrative. It probably makes the most sense to include paintings in the work samples rather than your music work. On the other hand, if you talk about your multidisciplinary practice and how paintings and music are integral to what you do, perhaps you want to include in the samples some short samples of both. So again, it's try to let the focus of the artist narrative inform your choices for the work samples.
Hi, this is Kelly. And to add to that, if I was a fiction writer, you know, I would have to decide on 5 pages of work, and whether it was an excerpt from a novel or if it was from a short story or 2 short stories. It really depends upon the type of work that you do. If I was writing a musical you'd have to decide whether you're going to send in the audio, or you're going to send in a combination of the script and the audio. It's really up to you as the artist. It's wide open. That's why, as Dan mentioned before, it's a total of 5 minutes, 5 images. The choice is yours.
Hi, Kelly, this is Dan. So we're right at the hour. I wonder, is there any other question that we may want to answer before we conclude?
Again, questions on evaluation. If you're a multimedia artist, if you're working in more than one medium, artists want to know, should they send in a sample from each medium?
So, hi, this is Dan. In general, that if your work is primarily multidisciplinary, then that makes sense. I don't know that it's necessarily an advantage to send in more than one type of work if it's not as central to your practice as, say, if you do multiple art forms, but one is really the practice that you focus on the most, then maybe that makes the most sense to be the focus of your application. It's just so hard to generalize. Every artist approaches this question differently. And for a truly multidisciplinary artist who works equally in a number of different forms, and it probably makes the most sense to divide up your work samples and send some of each, and take part of your devote part of your artist narrative to the different categories. I would just mention that we will make great efforts to make great efforts to match applicants with reviewers who have a similar basis in their discipline category, including reviewers who have a multidisciplinary basis.
A question on the jurors. Are the jurors specific to their field, and how are they chosen?
Hi, thanks. This is Dan. So the jurors are selected because they have indicated their interest in our system using the panelist or reviewer registration form. And they're selected by staff, by the artist team, and invited to take part. And we, as staff, will connect reviewers whose background is in a certain discipline category with work submitted in that discipline category. Yes.
Question on work samples. Do we accept websites as the work sample?
Hi, this is Dan. No, sorry, we don't accept websites. There has to be an uploaded sample. Okay, as Summer mentioned, we are doing office hours Thursdays at 11 virtually for the rest until the deadline. Please reach us at creative.individuals@mass.gov. Again, I just am so appreciative that you all joined us today for this event. And I also appreciate Melissa and Danielle and Doris who have helped us with interpretation and live captioning. Please contact us if you have any questions about applying, and we appreciate the work you do to make Massachusetts a more creative place. Thank you.